Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm thrilled to be able to announce our next session. As you know, we partner each year with Indiewire to present some very, very high-profile talent who are parts of some of the most amazing films that we have here screening this year at the festival. And today we have with us the cast and crew of both Foxcatcher and Whiplash. The Indiewire sessions are 30 minutes of one and then 30 minutes with the other. So please remain seated while we do a quick stage shift between sessions. But it's just so exciting to have with us today Bennett Miller, Channing Tatum, Mark Ruffalo, Steve Carell from Foxcatcher, who will be moderated by Ann Thompson from Indiewire. So please, please, please give a very, very warm TIFF welcome to cast and crew of Foxcatcher, moderated by Ann Thompson.
So you're all fresh from Telluride as well. And I wanted to ask Bennett first. This seems to me like just such an incredibly rich mystery thriller, something that, you know, it works so well with audiences. Why did it take so long to get made? Can you answer me that?
I mean, it was always going to be a story that was going to reveal itself slowly over time, and in researching it and developing it and working on the script and rehearsing and shooting and editing, at every stage the thing is still revealing itself. And there was so much just searching while shooting in the form of improvisation and discussions we'd have in between that we're collecting material, all informed by the real people and the real story, and getting to the edit and making sense out of it. And not just the story, but how the film communicates, quietly, and what's being said and what's, the undercurrents beneath it all, and how it all gets engineered together is something that you don't really premeditate. It's more like, you have to be patient with it.
So for the actors, talk about the process and talk about the research that you did, and talk about whether this made you excited or made you nervous to have so much responsibility for the characters that you were creating.
Mark, you want to take that?
Channing, you want to take that?
I don't have anybody else. Carell, you want to take that?
What was the question again? Our journey to creating these characters. Well, I met Bennett a few years ago, and unbeknownst to me, my agent had recommended me for the part, and we had met socially a couple of times. So I knew his work. I was a fan, but read the script and thought it was all of those things that Bennett just described, and certainly different for me, something that I'd never done before. And I was intrigued by it. I thought the story and the characters and the different layers within the characters of the layers of relationship between them. And someone described it as it is sort of a Greek tragedy when you read it. And so I jumped on board. I just wanted to work with Bennett and work with these guys. So that was my impetus to jump in.
So you guys were working with the surviving brother and the family, and how much responsibility did you feel to getting it exactly the way they wanted it to be, and how much could you deviate from that?
Well, Mark Schultz is obviously the brother that is surviving, and you feel an immense amount of pressure to get it right, because he's a very intense personality, to say the least. But even if he wasn't, it's such a real thing. I mean, he has to live his life after this movie, and his life keeps going, and you just want to be as honest as possible, and and on top of that, I mean, someone very, very real loses their life, and their family has to live with the film as well. So it's a mountain to bear, but it's worth it.
Yeah, you're dealing with people who existed, and then the next generation of people, Dave's kids, his wife, all of his friends. These guys were cherished in the community of wrestlers, and so there was an enormous amount of responsibility that went along with it. But Bennett also asked us to make this journey of finding out who these people were, and had connected us with the people who were very close to them. And I was lucky enough to have John Gira, who was one of Dave's closest friends, lived on the farm, who also worked out with us, trained with us, to come on as kind of a technical advisor, as well as Nancy, Dave's wife. And it became this sort of detective researching, investigative reporting job of taking what you were learning by listening to the stories of the people who survived Dave, watching hours of video, reading up, watching them wrestle, and then coming back and kind of reporting to Bennett, who would just take that material and then incorporate it into a deeper cut of the script or his understanding of these people. And so it became this very organic journey that we were taking, and with the family's blessings and their involvement and their presence. So it was this kind of interesting tightrope and a dance between reality, film, storytelling, and legacy. And so you're communicating not only with the film, but also with this person's life and the people who are still part of it. And so that was an interesting process to navigate, because you also have people's feelings and their sense of the past and memories.
And trust, too.
And trust. Yeah. Trust is the biggest issue.
But were they literally watching over your shoulder, or were they keeping a fair distance, and how awkward was that?
Yes, Mark Schultz was there for, I'd say about a good week, maybe a little more than a week of shooting. And at times it was extraordinary.
It was half a day.
What are you talking about? Maybe in my nightmare he was there for like a week and a half.
But he was lingering around. He was on the premises or parked out just outside the premises.
He's still here in my mind, actually.
And he's big. And scary.
He's actually on an airplane right now. He'll be here tomorrow for the screening.
Oh, good. Great.
So Bennett, why was Vanessa Redgrave the right person to play Mrs. DuPont? Why was she the one?
Well, I mean, have people seen the film yet in this audience? No, is there wrongness here? Well, I'm going to direct this to you, the one person who's seen it. I mean,
she nails it.
She plays, Vanessa Redgrave plays the mother of John DuPont, and a person who John DuPont can never live up to. And she's Vanessa Redgrave, and she can be, she can play that. She can play intimidating and condemning, and can make a person feel inadequate if she so desired. But could not have been a better person to work with.
What was it like working with her, Steve?
All of those things. It was intimidating and scary. was interesting. I think I was more intimidated prior to the day of shooting when I first met her, but she's so great that when you're working with her, she's not intimidating at all. Her character is, but she, as an actor, is not. She's so wonderful and obviously talented that she brings you into that world that she lives as an actor, and she's I don't know, she's just extraordinary. So no, every take we did, everything would be different. She was she's so fertile in terms of her mind and her choices, and it was exciting. That's the long and short of it.
So the movie did take a while, 8 years to get made. Who was the person
You know,
that
we
helped?
all did things in between. It wasn't like...
Yeah. Who was the person that helped to finally make sure that this movie existed? Who made that possible?
Whoever could you be referring to, Anne? I guess you're talking about Megan. Yeah, I mean, it's a movie that didn't make a lot of sense to studios or financiers because, as everybody knows, there are formulas that are used to assess and evaluate the sensibility of, you know, pulling the trigger or not. And Megan is her own person, and what happened was I spent some years trying to get the film made, finally conceded that it couldn't happen, and made Moneyball. And while finishing that up, Megan had come onto the scene, and somebody had recommended that I speak to her, and I had lunch with her, and I told her this story, and on the spot, she said, "I'll make that film with you," which, you know, being that the lunch was in Hollywood, I didn't take to mean very much, but she, you know, she was deadly serious about it and stuck with it, and I can, with a good amount of confidence, say that had she not, that there's no way this film would have been made, for sure.
Thank you, Megan Allison. Wait till you see it. So Steve, the character that you're playing is a dark guy, but we have no way of
We're talking
knowing-
about Get Smart right now, right?
We have no way of knowing how dark. It seems like he's motivated on some bizarre level by some kind of need for validation
Sure.
that he can't find. You want to talk about what's driving this guy and why he's...
What's driving DuPont? That's an enormous question. It's hard to talk about because, again, and relating to what Mark was saying, these are real people, and my attempt at the character is really just that. It's my best estimation as to who this guy was and what was motivating him. And you read as much as you can, and you watch as much as you can, and listen to how he spoke, and I tried to create it based on all of those elements and speaking to people who knew him as well as they could. Because again, I think he was the type of person that didn't have a very tight inner circle. I think many of the people who knew him were employees of his. So to get that true insight into who he was, a lot of it is just conjecture, frankly. So what motivated him? I think, you know, his relationships with his family. I think inadequacies that I think he felt he had. He surrounded himself with these athletes, these champions, because that's what he aspired to be. He aspired to greatness, and he fed off of that. He loved being in the presence of greatness because I think he felt that would sort of by osmosis make him that much greater. But it's a very, very layered question, I think. It's hard to say.
So Channing, for you, what was the most challenging aspect of playing Schultz? What was the most difficult thing for you?
You know, I mean, just like Steve just said. I mean, it wasn't just one thing. There's people are so complex and layered, and he doesn't say a lot, and there's a lot going on, obviously. I think not feeling the need to, to actually want a father figure, and not be so blatantly obvious about that. He so quickly latches on to DuPont in a way, and so very fast jumps almost away from his brother, and I, who knows if in real life that really happened like that, and I think just making that sort of jump physically and emotionally for him believable and really honest, I guess.
So talk about what it was like with all of you working together in the rehearsal process and being in close quarters and sort of working on this material over the course of a few weeks, was it, that you in months?
It was different for everybody because these guys had to start physically training and changing their bodies and learning how to wrestle, and that was the beginning. And Steve had so much, physical work with his voice and his body, and like a lot that happened before everybody ever showed up. We only got Channing like a few days after White House Down had spit you out. But
we started working.
Yeah, but we'd been talking about it for so long, and we had done so much, and Channing also had set up like a gym on that set. So really, honestly, what I was saying before about, exploring, we really rehearsed with the cameras rolling, and it wasn't just, it wasn't just blocking. It was, you know what? We're here. We're going to figure it out by the time we leave this room today. And let's roll, and let's work it, and let's explore it, and let's find it. And if there are problems with the scene or the different ways the scene had been written, with all the versions that we would bring on any given day, we're going to discover it, and we're going to find, what this is meant to be. And so that's another reason why it took a while, that we are rehearsing in front of the lens, which I think, in retrospect, was great. And there is an immediacy to these performances that I think just sucks you in, because you see in everyone's eyes, like you don't quite know what's going to happen, like life.
Was it scary?
Still is, yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Let's open it up for questions. There's a mic, and we'll start right there.
A question for all of you. In terms of building a character, when you're sort of working on developing a character, what are the things that you're sort of looking for to help you do that? And are there sort of essential bits of information or insight that you need to develop an honest portrayal of somebody? And for the director, when you're working with actors, how do you know when they've sort of nailed that interpretation? And at which point are you comfortable and say, I think we've reached that spot?
One of the actors want to answer that? Channing, you do it.
I'm not. Every character is different, and how you get into it. I mean, I don't think I've done the same one twice. For me, with Mark, something that actually Ruffalo and I talked about, and Bennett and I talked very early about, is that Mark is such a physical person. That's the way he negotiates the world, is through his physicality. And just watching the way he walked and the way he just holds himself and he sits, the way he holds his fork when he eats, he just grabs it and like just gets it like done. And you know, and just you can tell a lot about, and that was my way into him. You know, you can just tell a lot. He just eats, you know, and instead of savoring the food, it's just fuel. Like he's just an animal, and in a way, just eating. I don't mean Mark as a person, but and you know, and that is. I think Ruffalo said you can get into the character's lifeblood in a very non-literal way of understanding somebody, but in a DNA way, which was really helpful for me.
Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that you know, every movie and every character you do sort of takes you on its own journey, and it's sort of sometimes intuitive. As I've gotten older, I've found that a physical life of a character informs a lot of an inner life, you know, and if you could find something that's essentially physically that person, and everyone has their, I mean, you just look around you, you could see by the way somebody sits, and it's a manifestation of some part of their personality, believe it or not, even the way they talk. And so I tend to find myself really interested in the physical life of a character to start to kick off the emotional life. And you know, when you're dealing with real people, you get this sort of incredible amount of information that's really surprising a lot of times, much more surprising than if you try to imagine it even. And so it's been interesting to go from real people to just characters that I'm making up based on what I'm reading from a script. But each thing has its own kind of journey for me.
I feel like it's I don't know. It feels like playing hundreds of games of chess with different people at the same time. That's the only analogy that comes to mind. You're playing multi-level chess with each other character in the movie, and you're trying to keep track of all the moves and all of their moves, and you're thinking while you're playing one game, there are umpteen other games going on in your head, and I don't know if that makes any sense. And I think you do all your preparation before you get there. So then when you start playing chess, it's just you're in the character and you're playing. I don't know if that makes any sense. It might sound dumb.
Do you remember the question?
I believe you asked, how do you know when you've got it? And this entire time I've been trying to think of an answer to that question, but I feel like you kind of know when it happens. I spent so much time, you know, thinking about the story, these characters, but mostly the engineering of the organization of the story, and knowing what it is that is wanted from these scenes. You know, I'm relying on this scene to learn this. And when you've got that coincidence of the performance and the character coming together with the expression of, you know, what's being said in the superficial realm, and inadvertently expressing something that the scene mandates, when it happens, you recognize it because you're looking for it, you're looking for the thing. And when that coincidence of, along with, you know, light and composition, camera move, look, whatever, when that happens, it just, I mean, you feel it. Sometimes it was more fragmented than that, and it would come in fits and starts, and it becomes a question of, do you have enough to cobble something together? And other stuff happens in one take.
On that note, I'm afraid we're coming. Do we have room for one more? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, on another note, I'm new to the film industry, and one thing that I've realized recently is that a lot of these complicated, nuanced movies don't get made without A-list talent attached. And so I'm wondering, I guess, as actors, how do you come to terms with your roles, not just as artists, but as commodities, I guess, as well?
Commodity number one.
Steve Carell?
I'm comfortable with being a commodity. No, if that's, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but
I have to intervene and say I don't think that that's true. I want to start by saying I cannot imagine anybody else in these roles but these three people. Period. Given could I scour the whole world, I would have no confidence that they would find people better than these three, and not just individually, also as a group, and the chemistry and how it felt doing this, and who were up for it and willing to be miserable together and everything else that's required. But also back to Megan Ellison, I think once she went off the formula and said, you know what, even though everyone's saying that this arrangement of cast and me and genre does not equal foreign pre-sales greater to X percentage that's required in these regions, whatever these formulas that make no sense to me are. When she disregarded that, I think all bets were off, and had I said, these are the three guys, and if those three guys were the right guys, I really do believe she would have bet on the film. This was not a bet on these guys being, commodities. Having said that, most films have that as a consideration for sure. But I think this was an exception.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Congratulations, I have seen the film. It was great. Performances were excellent. From what I do know about you guys, no one really has a wrestling background. I'm wondering if, other than Mark, I guess, that Steve just pointed out.
State champion, Mark Ruffalo.
Really?
It didn't help me at all.
Well, that's what I wanted to know. Were there injuries in filming this movie, or were there strains? And how did you feel about shooting some of those scenes?
No animals were harmed in the production of this.
Except for this, yeah. My knees will never be the same. My neck will never go back to its normal size. I think we both have the beginning of starter kits of actual real cauliflower ear. And it's, the whole thing was and God knows the scars that are on my soul that Bennett has given me. But
did your eardrum fix itself? Or?
Oh yeah. The slap, I don't know if it's the actual one in the movie or not, because I got slapped a bunch in this movie. Thank you, Steve Carell, as well as Mark. So the first, just a funny story about a not so fun scene. A little insight into that is Mark Ruffalo is such a sweetheart that he comes in and he tries to, he's got to wake me up out of this like crazy place that I'm in. And he's going to slap me, and he kind of just sort of, really pushes my head really hard. And I was like, look, just do it. You got to just do it. It's the time. And so he really did it on the next take, and perfectly cupped my ear in such a way that I popped my eardrum. I didn't actually know what happened because it was one of those like really weird moments where like all the sound actually goes out of the room and it just goes beep. It's for the next 20 minutes that's all I could hear, so like it helped me with the acting because I was
That didn't happen. He paid me back.
I definitely paid him back, I can promise you.
Have we got another? Go ahead. Who has the mic? There we go.
Hi, Ben. Hello? My question's for Bennett. As a director with such an A-list cast, were you able to do much rehearsal time? And
I'll take
what was
this.
your process for that? Sorry.
Go ahead, Rob.
Just-
I mean, I think every I don't know every filmmaker, but it's common for directors to say, look, we're going to rehearse this for 8 weeks. We're going to rehearse it like a play. And then you settle with like 2.5 days, but none of them together, you know? This, because we worked on the film for so long and because these guys were attached for so long, you know, rehearsal and discussions came here and there. But Steve was able to make it down about 2 weeks before we started shooting. Ruffalo, he came down, was it like 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks before? And Channing and I spent time, and we'd spent time together before all of that as well. And Channing and I had to get our time in before White House Down, which, you know, came butt up against our start date. And so we had to work it before.
But I would like to add to that. It was 7 months from the time that Channing and I first met to the day we started shooting. And when we first met, we started training. And during that 7 months, it was meetings with friends. It was a long process of researching. And it grows inside you, even if you're not literally rehearsing every single day. The fact that you're having engaged the work and started that process, it's actually working inside of you during that period of time. And there was so much of these guys' lives is their physical expression. I mean, they don't have to say a lot to convey. Wrestlers really use their physical world to express themselves. They're not particularly articulate as a group verbally, but their physical sense is very, very keen and very nuanced. And so that was working on us the whole time. And so although we didn't get a long time of rehearsal, by the time we had landed and started shooting, we were more prepared in a lot of ways than probably a lot of people who do 3 or 4 weeks of rehearsal.
Thank you. And it's time to wrap up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.